Thank you for having me. I'm Neha Palmer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of TerraWatt Infrastructure. I am here today to tell you that charging is not going to be the bottleneck. There's a lot of talk about all of the infrastructure required to make this EV transition happen. And there is a lot of effort underway to smooth the charging piece of it. And TerraWatt is a company that is on a mission to make sure, again, charging is not going to be the bottleneck. We're on a mission to provide the most reliable source of charging for commercial fleets. Again, the focus is on commercial fleets. We know that there's a lot of effort out there on the public side, but for this transition to truly happen, we have to capture that fleet market. And TerraWatt is here to provide solutions for that. A little bit about me and kind of why we started TerraWatt. For a decade before I started TerraWatt, I was at Google leading energy strategy for them as they built out a bunch of data centers across the world. And you might be asking yourself, what do data centers have to do with EVs? And really, what is so important is that it is a very similar stack of infrastructure that you need to build to power servers, that you need to power vehicles. The good news is there's a lot of experience in the world in doing that. So we can take the lessons that we learned from that and apply them to a new use case. I was super excited about this. I've been passionate about figuring ways to reduce emissions. While I was at Google, we got them to 100% renewable. And one big thing that I noticed when we were doing that is that there were a lot of corporations that joined us along the way. Any big energy user over the years suddenly realized that there was a way to meet their needs with clean sources of energy. That corporate will was one of the big factors in actually starting to convert the power systems globally, but especially here in the US. And so I saw some of that will happening in the EV space. I'd say almost all of the Fortune 50 has made commitments around becoming carbon neutral or even net negative. And so I saw the will to start this transition, especially as they started thinking about their supply chains and fleet electrification. So with that in mind, we started TerraWatt about 3 years ago. And again, leveraging the lessons that we have from electrifying other industries, data centers, and applying that to what is a pretty complex use case, but something that can absolutely be done. So we've raised $1 billion, but I'll talk about my entire cohort. Some of them are here today. There is a lot of capital that is excited about this space. Money is not the constraint. You pair, I think it's about $5 billion of private capital that has talked about investing into this space, along with all of the great incentives and programs that have come out of the IIJA and the IRA. There is money ready to put to work for this purpose. We are actively developing these sites. TerraWatt has 14 sites under development. If I go to my entire cohort of companies that are doing this, there are dozens of sites under development to help fleets start to electrify. On the heavy-duty side, EV trucks emit 63% less greenhouse gas than diesel. So as the corporate will to reduce their carbon emissions grows, this will be an important part of the toolkit for them to get there, especially as it relates to their supply chain. So where are we with EV electrification? You hear a lot about, hey, it's start-stop, vehicle prices, vehicle availability. Again, the first thing that we see are these environmental commitments from a growing list of companies. There are people who are starting beyond piloting and starting to convert large amounts of their fleets to EVs. A typical commercial fleet can turn over once every 10 years, and so they have a buying decision they make every single year. Many of them are electing to start to fold EVs into their buying on an annual basis at scale, which is really exciting. There's a lot of federal, state, and other mandates that are also pushing this. A little compliance never hurts anybody, especially as we're trying to kick off a new industry. So we do see things like the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule in California, other warehouse rules that are really pushing companies to start to make this transition faster maybe than they might on their own. But many times it's aligned with what they're already trying to do internally. Government and utility programs. So A lot of the utilities are figuring out ways to help this transition. They realize that we need their product, and so they're putting programs in place, like things to make the interconnect process cheaper and potentially faster, not always faster, but trying to do so. And also government rules that allow us to do things like move faster through permitting processes, because these are very intense installations, especially when it comes to the fleet application. The other tailwind that is starting to emerge is this lower cost of operation for EVs. I want to be transparent. We are there on the light-duty side. We've seen lots of fleets tell us, hey, it's actually not in the shop that often. Might need tires more often, but it's a pretty exciting experience for them when they realize that these are on the road more often than not. Heavy-duty side, we are still early days, but we're seeing that technology transition start to happen and fleets starting to see the benefits of electric vehicles. So the other side of it is headwinds. And again, here to tell you that charging is not going to be the bottleneck. A lot of it is because there are companies like TerraWatt out there that are ready to provide solutions to some of these headwinds. It can be complex for fleets to make that transition in their operations from ICE vehicles, which have had a very known operational pattern for the last century at this point, and folding that into their existing operations. So there is a learning curve for fleets. What we do see is a lot of excitement for the technology. If you talk to any driver, especially on the heavy-duty side, who has piloted an EV, they love the driving experience. If any of you drive an EV, you know it is a wonderful experience to drive a vehicle with that much torque. Apply that to a semi-truck, and it's that much better. The upfront capital costs are still high for some of the use cases, especially when it comes to charging. It requires a very large amount of power. It requires a lot of upfront capital for the chargers. Also, a lot of planning with the utility and planning with the landlord if they don't own their site. And it can be complex from an infrastructure perspective. We are still starting to evolve as an industry. The technology is evolving. So trying to catch the right moment and the right technology can be difficult for fleet owners who have been basically running sites and just fueling kind of on a really normal schedule for many years. Oftentimes, these fleets are busting at the seams. I think we all saw the run-up in what was happening with real estate over the last couple of years, especially in warehouse hubs. So they oftentimes don't have the space to do this. And then power, always a consideration when they are installing charging. Their site may have been there for 20 years. They did not put that site there thinking about, does that circuit above have power? TerraWatt has the capability and the know-how to solve all of these problems for a customer so they can get a turnkey solution, so they know that when they buy those vehicles, they have that charging solution in place next door to their facility. So charging at scale is complex. I'm a skier, so I like the green, blue, black analogy. But when we're talking about passenger vehicles, 10 of them, not too bad. Don't need too much power. But when you get to the far end, it's incredibly difficult. We're starting to get to the level of data centers for this heavy-duty use case when you have many vehicles with large batteries charging all at once. So again, this is something that TerraWatt and companies like ours are well-versed in providing solutions to the market to do this, well ahead of when they will have these vehicles. We already have, again, those 14 sites in construction. Many of our cohort have that as well. This charging is alive and ready to go today. So the solutions we offer are charging infrastructure and charging services. Again, it is a transition. This is technology tied to power, tied to customer operations. And what we really want to do is make sure that the customer can focus on their operations. The fleet will do what it is expert at, running their business. And companies like ours can provide the solution set so they don't even have to think about it. So in closing, again, charging will not be the bottleneck. We are working well in advance of these large-scale fleets coming to fruition. We know that the planning cycle is long, but we are making these investments now. We have a lot of support with some government programs. TerraWatt was the recipient of a $64 million grant in the last round of grants submitted for the federal CFI program, for example. So many tailwinds for companies like ours that are here and ready and willing to provide this infrastructure for this transition. Thank you.